Hello, we are group A58. My name is Alice.
My name is Alistair.
My name is Finley.
And today we're going to be discussing three main economic topics.
Firstly, Trumponomics, which I will be explaining.
Next, TSMC, which will show you what it's really like to be inside the factory, which I will be explaining.
Finally, we will look into air pollution and discuss its economic effects as well as its broader environmental impact, which I will present.
We will approach this presentation in a conversational way and finish each topic with a Q&A.
For Trumponomics, we will look into newspaper articles and discover the impact of the US tariffs.
For TSMC, we will visit the actual factory and look into its economic impacts on a global scale.
For air pollution, we will look into real cases and examine how negative externalities lead to market failure.
And now let's begin with Trumponomics.
Hi, Alice. I'm reading this magazine. I found out that Trump is putting tariff on Taiwan.
Yeah, that's how Trumponomics works.
Huh? What's Trumponomics?
You don't know what's Trumponomics? I mean, it's the hottest news recently, I'll say so.
I didn't notice that.
Well, Trumponomics is basically that Trump's doing his way, like, economic things. You don't know that?
No.
Well, sure, I'll explain to you. I'm going to introduce what is Trumponomics. And according to Time Magazine 2025 February, there is a topic. An article says that how Trump's tariff could hike price in the US. So we can tell from this topic that Trump's economics not only just affect international market, they also do affect their domestic market. And so if we want to understand what is a Trumponomic, what is Trumponomics, first we have to know what is a tariff. A tariff is simply a tax that government imposes on the imported goods. And what is a reciprocal tariff, especially in the context of US Taiwan trade? So we have to understand the reciprocal tariff is basically that if you tax me, then I'll tax you back. And under Trumponomics, the US pushed for what President Trump called fair and reciprocal. For Taiwan, these mostly mean two things. First is that the U.S. demand lower trade barriers on certain American products. For example, pork, the Laizhu issue. And second is that the third was that if the U.S. felt the trade wasn't fair, whatever he feels unfair, then he could tax us. So although Taiwan was not targeted as heavily as China did, we still face U.S. pressure under Trumponomics. For example, the negotiation between over pork imports contain 多巴胺. Taiwan relaxed restriction partly to avoid reciprocal tariff retaliation. And second, what do we have, what alternative policy instrument do you have besides tariff? There is another measure called quota. A quota is a physical limit on on how many units that can be imported into our country. When a country wants to guarantee a strict fixed limit on imports, then they would prefer quota, because with their imports might still increase if foreign exporters are efficient, but with quota, the quantity is fully controlled. And next, I'm going to show you a graphic analysis about U.S. import market under a reciprocal tariff, which you will represented here. And as you can see from this graphic, is that the domestic price of the imported good increase, and U.S. consumer buy less because the imported goods becomes more expensive, and U.S. domestic producers sell more because the higher price of imported goods makes a producer more competitive again, and the import quantity shrinks because imports are now more costly. And second, I'm going to show you another graphic, which is Taiwan's export market to the U.S. From Taiwan's side, we use a supply-demand diagram for export market, and this graphic, we can see that Taiwan's export demand curve shifts downward because U.S. buyer now demands lower, and Taiwan's equilibrium export price fall, quantity drops, meaning that Taiwan sells fewer goods abroad. In short, Taiwan's producers face lower price and lower output and lower revenue. So, welfare effects on Taiwan. How does tariff impact Taiwan welfare? For Taiwan's producer, is something clearly negative and worse. They earn less and export less, but for consumers in Taiwan, they may be a small benefit because the goods originating for export might flow back to Taiwan and become more cheap. And for the government, they gain nothing because tariff is imposed on us and we can't retaliate with them. And overall, Taiwan's welfare declines because the loss to producers is much larger than the benefit to the consumers. And welfare effects on the United States. Finally, what happens to the state's welfare? According to the magazine, we can tell that the tariff do affect their domestic market. Is that U.S. consumers are worse off because they cannot buy something that is more cheap. They face higher price and fewer choice. However, the producers are better off because their goods become more competitive because the imported good is more expensive, and the U.S. government gain profit from tariff because tariff is tax and tax. Like government gain tax. But then in conclusion, even with tariff revenue, the economy still suffered an overall loss. The cost to consumer is larger than combined benefit to produce and the government tariff revenue. So net welfare for the U.S. falls, although some specific industry gain. Yeah, that's all about Trumponomics. Thank you for listening.
Do you guys have any questions about Trumponomics?
So, why is Taiwan vulnerable to US tariffs?
That's because Taiwan is a highly export-dependent country, especially in the field of electronics and machinery. So losing access to the state's market has a large economic impact.
Could Taiwan respond with its own reciprocal tariff?
Well, technically, yes, but realistically, Taiwan avoid retaliation because the U.S. is Taiwan's key security partner. So Taiwan usually just choose to negotiate instead. Do you know anything about TSMC factory?
Yeah, I'll take you all there now. Fixed home investment is the purchasing of a long-lasting physical asset. In this case, TSMC's new factories globally. If TSMC has many fixed-term assets, they will show profitability in the long run, whilst maintaining economic stability. I believe that TSMC's expansion to the US and Germany is a long-term decision, mainly as a result of the threat of China. Due to TSMC providing 93% of the world's semiconductors, this expansion means that the chips will be protected, essentially not putting all of their eggs in one basket. This is not necessarily a positive for Taiwan, because it weakens their silicon shield, which they have depended on for protection for many years. So now that we've been to the TSMC factory, let's look at the economics. As you can see in this graph here, we can determine the price maximizing quantity, where MR equals MC. And then we find the corresponding point on the demand curve, which is this pink rectangle placed over here. We can also look at the deadweight loss of TSMC, which is the triangle-shaped area between D and MC. This occurs above the MR equals MC output level, but below the monopoly price. So do you have any questions about TSMC?
Yes. So what are the main economic challenges that TSMC had to overcome to become a monopoly?
So there are two main factors that led to TSMC gaining a monopoly. Firstly, the massive fixed costs and economies of scale. TSMC had to overcome the huge capital barrier of building advanced factories. Once they invested billions into capacity, they achieved economies of scale, ultimately lowering their costs. And secondly, the technological leadership as a barrier to entry. For example, They changed their microchip size from 7 nanometers to just 3. This required huge costs, and no other businesses could replicate this. And as a result, I believe that by overcoming these economic challenges, TSMC secures close to a near monopoly.
So I have another question. Why is TSMC considered natural monopoly?
It's considered a natural monopoly because the semiconductor foundry industry has extremely high fixed costs, so it's got really harsh barrier to entries for smaller businesses, and as a result, TSMC can thrive without many competitors.
Thank you.
Oh my god, it's classic. I miss a lot of the smell of real tree. My topic is air pollution and negative externalities, and I will use the Taichung coal-fired power plant as example. The Taichung power plant is one of the largest coal-fired power plants in the world. It supplies electricity for household and industry in Taiwan. However, it also releases large amounts of PM2.5, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, and carbon dioxide. These pollutants cause health problems, environmental damage, and climate change, which affect people who are not a part of the electricity market transaction. This is a typical case of negative externality. The producer is Taipower, which mainly consider private costs such as fuel, labor, and equipment. The victims are local residents, patients, farmers, and society as a whole. Because the power plant does not fully pay for the damage it caused, marginal private cost is lower than marginal social cost. As a result, the firm produced where MB equals MPC, not MB equals MSC. So the market produces too much electricity and too much pollution. This is why negative externality leads to the market failure. On the diagram, the market equilibrium is at MB equals MPC, giving Q market. The socially optimal output is at MB equals MSC, giving Q social. Because Q market is larger than Q social, pollution is excessive. The deadweight loss is the triangle between MB and MSC. Between these two quantities, producer and some consumer gain extra benefit, but society loses more through health and environmental damage. There are two main solutions. First, comments and control regulations, such as emission standards and require pollution control equipment. This is clear, but often costly and inflexible. Second, the Pigovian tax, which is a tax equal to the marginal external cost of pollution. The tax shifts MPC up to MSC, so the new equilibrium becomes Q social and the deadweight loss disappears. Taiwan applies these ideas through the Air Pollution Control Act and Air Pollution Control Fee. In 2023, pollution fees on harmful pollutants like VOC were increased. These fees work like a Pigovian tax, encouraging firms to reduce emissions, although challenges and political resistance still remain. When pollution crosses borders, such as haze in South Asia, it becomes an international externality. International cooperation, such as carbon markets and climate agreement, can act like a global Pigovian mechanism. To conclude, air pollution from Taichung power plant is negative externality. Because MPC is smaller than MSC, the market overproduces and creates deadweight loss. A Pigovian tax is the most efficient economic solution. Taiwan already applies this idea through pollution fees. Thank you for listening. Did you have any question?
Yeah. I have one question. Is why does a negative externality cause the market to produce more than the social optimal quantity?
Because producers only consider their private cost and ignore the external cost imposed on society, leading to overproduction and excess pollution.
No.
So how does a Pigovian tax help internalize the externality?
A Pigovian tax forces producers to pay the external costs they impose, shifting MPC upward to the MSC, which reduces output and pollution to the society optimal level.
Okay. So what can we learn from all of this?
Firstly, while reciprocal tariff are intended to create fairness in trade, but it often reduces efficiency and hurt the trading partners, create tensions between like Taiwan and America.
Secondly, TSMC continues to thrive as the biggest economic monopoly in semiconductor manufacturing.
Finally, air pollution clearly shows how negative externalities lead to market failure. And by using policies, government can reduce pollution and move the market closer to the socially optimal level.
We are Group A58. Thank you for watching.